Geneen, I am so incredibly grateful to be spending this time with you. Thank you so much for making the time.
I am thrilled to be here. Really thrilled.
It's really cool that I get to sit down with somebody who has uh, breathed life back into me, um, given me wings. I've been talking about you nonstop. I've read this book, Women, Food, and God. You have so many other also awesome books. But this book is responsible for changing me more than any experience, any teacher, any class. I can't even describe that this is the book that every human being has to read. And I know that you've written so many other good books, but if you would have just indulged me, I thought that we could talk first about this book. Is that okay?
Absolutely. I think we should talk about what you want to talk about.
Okay. Because the whole world is in this book. So, okay, so I have notes because I could literally read every page almost. There's an excerpt that I was like, this woman's ability to hand us the elixir. I mean, it's on a level I've just never witnessed. So let's begin with what led you personally to want to do this kind of work, to want to give people this kind of transformation that you've been doing in all the different books that you do.
Despair that there was any way to emerge from the nightmare and the hell that I was living in terms of my relationship to food, weight, and my body.
Right.
Also, my relationship to myself and self-hatred. So it felt, I felt trapped and I didn't feel like there was any hope. So I hit bottom. And when I hit very, very bottom, I started understanding that there was a glimmer somewhere. And that was about looking at what I was actually doing with food, being curious about my relationship with food instead of wanting to get rid of it and myself.
Yep. And so before we go into the work itself and the wisdom you extrapolated from your journey, what was the next step for you? What actually set you free?
It was a series of steps. It wasn't one huge step, but I would say if I had to boil it down to the initiating step, the one that all the other steps and unfoldments followed from, it was the decision to stop depriving, punishing, and shaming myself around food, which then meant not dieting. I was 28 when I realized that I had been on either a diet or a binge every single day of my life without exception for 17 years, and that I didn't have any idea. There was no image in my mind that it was even possible to do anything but diet and binge, lose weight and gain weight, hate myself, supposedly like myself. But even when I was liking myself after I lost weight, I was scared of gaining weight. And so there wasn't any resting place. There wasn't any home inside myself. And I didn't believe there could be until I realized that life actually wasn't worth living for me if I was going to carry on like that. And
Yep.
so not dieting for me was, this is going to sound odd, but a step above just not even living and killing myself. I didn't want to keep living like that. And because I was so desperate, I realized that, well, gee, if I'm willing to lose everything, including my life, I mean, I'm saying this, I don't mean to sound cavalier about this because it wasn't cavalier. I was so desperate and it was such a dark, dark time for me. And I felt so trapped inside myself. And so when I realized I couldn't keep living like that, then not dieting felt like, well, that's still being alive. I'm
Mhm.
not going to be dying, but I'm willing to risk what will happen if I don't diet, since I was willing to lose everything.
Yeah.
So,
The reason for me that this book is for everyone, this particular book, she has so many, for those of you listening, she has so many incredible books that have all been so well received. But Women, Food, and God was the first one I read. And the reason I say that it's for anyone is because even if you're not having a relationship with food that's challenging, you could substitute food for anything else that you might use to run from what you feel. And one of the biggest things that I took away from reading this book was an opportunity to roll out the welcome mat to what I was feeling.
mhm.
And the way you taught me that there's something beyond the feeling that is actually good, that there's a strength
Mm.
and there's a place where we meet something bigger than the pain that's holding the pain. And it's not the pain itself that hurts, it's the constant refusing to feel our feelings. Can you explain that and talk to us about that? Because I really think we all need to hear it.
So, what you're asking is about the process of naming our feelings. Just tell me if I understand you correctly. The process of naming our feelings and then feeling our feelings and seeing what else is there underneath our feelings or beyond our feelings or through our feelings. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. And I'm asking about that initial constant busyness in bolting and running, this constant running from how we feel, which is causing so much suffering.
I think at least this was for me and many of the people that I work with now. Um, Nobody really ever taught us that it was okay to feel our feelings, to actually just stop for a moment or 5 minutes or 10 minutes and notice, oh, I feel really sad right now. I feel lonely right now or empty. There's an emptiness now or grief stricken now. We didn't really learn that we could live through feeling our feelings. We didn't really learn that. We didn't have it modeled. I know, my mother and I know many other parents just felt like, come on, we got to pull ourselves up here. We
Right.
got to get on with this. Don't stop. It seems self-indulgent or it seems selfish or uh, that if you did that, you'd never do anything else in your entire life. You would just be overwhelmed. You never get off the bed. So, first, it's actually recognizing that something's going on that's prompting, let's just say in the relationship with food, prompting the turning to food. It's not because you're crazy or you lack willpower. It's not because you really like chocolate or you really love sweet potatoes. It's because something's going on most of the time, if you're not hungry and you're turning to food, that you haven't named, haven't made room for, haven't welcomed, and haven't sort of touched yourself with and said, sweetheart, what's happening here? What's going on? Tell me all about it. And I think to speak to ourselves like that, we haven't learned how to do it. And it's something that we just have to keep learning over and over and over and over again. It's not one and done. It's not, okay, well, I've done it once. Now I really know how to do it. No, it's a practice, basically. It's a practice of being kind to yourself. And it is tough to do, because what's easiest to do for most of us is to hurry up, get on with it. Enough already. Or, oh my God, I can't believe you're feeling sad about this again. When are you going to get over this?
Yeah.
So that's the first step there.
Yeah. And we live in a time where everyone's telling you to crush your goals and go do it. And I have so many people who come through this audience and say, why does that not work? What's wrong with me? And it's like, I was just listening to John Kabat-Zinn say, how often do we just put the welcome mat out to what's here? And we just had Rachel Platten, who's a songwriter, on the podcast today. And she said, who says that we're supposed to judge which kind of feeling is better than another? Oh, well, happiness is allowed, sadness isn't. So until we can just be beside the river and hold witness, it's what you said earlier. The word is, we shame ourselves. We don't want to accept parts of ourselves. So there's a split energy there. There's a resistance there. So can you speak to how we can understand and bring light to this shame, and how we can let go of the shame?
Well, the first thing is to recognize what's going on. So let's just take the issue with food for a second. And this, you're right, it shows up in so many
Yeah.
other ways. It's not just about food. Substitute almost any pattern you do over and over and over again for food.
Yeah.
But let's say, I mean, like if you check your email 900,000 times a day,
Right.
if you just feel so-called addicted to your digital devices, and there's just this automatic, constant picking it up, not that anything's changed in the last 10 minutes. So with food, the first thing that happens is that I've noticed that I'm eating and I'm not hungry. I've noticed that. So that's the first thing that is going on. Now, either that can happen, or what precedes that is some kind of feeling, bodily feeling, like a sinking in your chest or a knot in your stomach. You realize a friend just said something to you that felt awful, or made you sad, or you just found out you didn't get that job. Just found out that a friend of yours has COVID. It can be any number of things. And what we usually do is bypass the body. We usually run right over the feeling, the heaviness in the chest, the knot in the stomach, the tension in the back or the neck, or in fact, this breath holding. And that's the first sign that something's going on. The body speaks to you. Most of us run right over that. We don't want to stop for that. And so we'll go to the next level, which is, okay, well, I think I'll just eat a bag of chips now. I'll just eat, because that's a distraction. Food at that point is a distraction from the initial feeling. Yes, it's a distraction from the bodily feelings, but it's also a reaction to the initial hurt or sadness or grief or loneliness or emptiness or upset of some kind, disappointment, rejection, abandonment, I mean, you name it. And so the first thing is you notice the feelings. Then if you didn't notice the feelings, you notice reaching for food. And each one of these are ways you can stop yourself. So you can just say, okay, honey, I can feel the tightness in my chest. What's happening? Or, wow, suddenly I'm halfway through a bag of chips. Or I am now lost on the internet watching cute animal videos on YouTube, when really what happened 20 minutes ago is that my friend said something that was painful to me. How did this happen? What's going on? So we sort of like thread our way back. Unfortunately, and this is where the shame comes in, we start attacking ourselves for doing what we're doing. I woke up in the middle of the night last night, and I haven't slept well for the last few nights. And I noticed that my mind was going off on what I hadn't done and the emails I didn't write and all the things I
Sure.
thought I was going to do during the pandemic that I actually have not done, like paint, learn Spanish, write a book, finish a book. Just I can't tell you how many things I thought I was going to do that I haven't done in this past year. And last night, this is aside from the emails that I didn't write and aside from the projects that are still ongoing, I started noticing, oh, I am attacking myself for making myself wrong for not doing those things. And then at that point, I'm caught. Then there's shame. So then there's shame at just being
Mm.
myself. And then at that point, that's another chance, because shame makes you feel horrible. Talk about collapsing, being paralyzed, being 2 feet tall, feeling like you're really young and you need a big person who knows it all to save you.
Right.
And that's another thing to notice and to stop. And what I often do, but I've been through this process with myself many times, and I at some point will get up and start walking around and realize this is an old tape. This
Yeah.
is old. This is what my mother told me. I am now believing what was, I'm now treating myself the way I was treated.
Yeah. You say something, so many powerful things. Something you say in the beginning, close to the beginning of the book, you say, when we welcome what we most want to avoid, we evoke divinity itself.
Yes.
What is that? Help us understand what that means.
Well, if I notice that I am sad, if I notice that I'm lonely, if I notice that I'm feeling empty, I am not totally merged in the sadness or the loneliness or the emptiness. Something in me bigger than the feeling is noticing the feeling.
Yeah.
And that thing, if you want to call it a thing, that presence, that awareness, we can call it awareness,
Yeah.
is noticing that. And that is, there are many words to describe that. There's just no, and the second you put a name on it, it's not it anymore. All I know is that that which notices it isn't it, and that which notices it doesn't have a history, isn't ashamed, is like the sky that can hold thunderclouds and rainbows and dark clouds and all of that, but isn't affected or touched by any of it.
Yeah. What I felt, I was reading this book and rereading it every morning, and I would sit outside and like give myself a chance to sit beside myself and feel whatever was there. And I realized, oh my gosh, I would rather feel whatever it is than have an agenda to be happy, quote unquote, because boy, does it feel good just to be in integrity. It
Yeah.
feels good to be aligned with what's here.
Yes, right. The truth.
And I had never had an experience of realizing that there was something satisfying that almost felt good, even being in pain, because I was finally not running away from what I felt.
Yes, right.
And I have to read something while we're here, because everyone, if you don't have this book, you have to go get it. I literally got on Instagram so many times and was like, you guys have to hear this. But so there's literally 79 pages I could read out loud, but I just wanted to read this one part where you said, even when you become something because they were right, you really were going places. The writing is just so good. Even when you arrive at being someone because you are where you were going, your life may not be any better if you haven't learned to be awake, alive now. And you go on to talk about this, and literally every line is so delicious. But this idea that, you know, that place you want to go, even when you get there, because you might. What then if you always want to be in the next moment and not the one that you're in?
You know, I was just talking to this group. I teach a meditation on Wednesdays. And that's exactly the thing I was talking about a couple of days ago. Exactly what I was talking about. What I was saying is, if I walk across the room, let's just boil it down to the most essential, like the smallest little movements that anybody can relate to. Let's just say I'm getting up in the morning and I'm making coffee or tea. And I can't wait to make the coffee because I love coffee and I love the process and I love this and I love that and I love the taste of it. And so I'm walking from one room to where the kitchen is, the coffee, and I'm thinking about making the coffee while I'm walking. So while I'm walking from room to room, I am missing the way the sun falls in the room. I'm missing the way my feet feel on the floor. I'm missing my dog's tail wagging. I'm missing the arrangement of flowers on the kitchen table. I'm missing the way the water, thank God, water comes out of the faucet. I mean, we still have water. Isn't that amazing? I'm missing everything until I get the coffee, because I'm waiting and I'm waiting and I'm waiting. I can't wait to have the coffee. Then I finally have the cup of coffee. And the second I get the coffee, I'm thinking about the emails I haven't written or what I'm going to do after I finish the coffee. And gee, maybe I should drink the coffee sitting down over here. No, maybe I should drink it while I'm reading this email. No, I think I'll go out to my writing studio. Okay, I'll go out to my writing studio. So I'm holding the cup of coffee and I'm walking to my writing studio. And the whole time I'm walking, I'm noticing nothing. I'm just thinking about the email that I need to write. So then I sit down at my computer. The coffee's gone. I haven't really tasted the coffee. So far, I haven't really walked, been present for the walk, been present for the coffee, except for maybe a second. Now I'm sitting at the email and I just open the emails and there are 35 emails. Oh my God, look at all these emails. So then I write the email, but I really feel like I need to be done with this email because I have to get to the other emails. So where have I been for the last half an
Nowhere.
hour? Nowhere. I have been in every single thing I've done. My agenda has been to do it and get it done with. And then, I mean, in a sort of unconscious way. I mean, I wouldn't say to you when I wake up in the morning, oh, I can't wait to make the coffee so I can get done with making the coffee. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to say that. But if I'm not noticing the things I'm doing while I'm doing it, then the end of the day comes. I've always been steps ahead of myself. I've never been where I am. And then I feel like, what happened to this day? I missed the day. That is how people spend most of their lives, waiting for their lives to begin. And I think I wrote about that in Women, Food, and God. We think our lives are going to begin when we lose weight. And then we lose weight and we get scared of gaining weight. Or losing weight isn't what we thought it was going to be. We thought it was going to make it better, it being everything. and it didn't make it better. So then a lot of people just gain weight back so they can have losing weight to look forward to, so they can think that it's going to make it better. But that's what happens when people win the lottery, or they win the lottery, they think their lives are going to be better, and then they go back to exactly where they were in terms of their happiness set point, that's what people call it,
Mhm.
before they won the lottery.
Yeah.
So the bottom line is, and this is so hard to get, I mean, this like flailing and thrashing and I don't want to get this, is that it's not out there, that it isn't in the shape of your body, the job promotion. It's not in a relationship, because if you can't give yourself what your partner might be giving you, if you're fortunate to have a partner like that, then you still have to go to sleep alone and wake up alone. You're still inside your own minds. And so this is really an inside job. And how does it begin? By opening up your eyes, getting out of bed, and noticing that you're walking.
Yeah. And you talk about it in the book, and I don't want to take, oh, well, here it is. I actually just turned to it. You said, people see God every day. Well, you quoted the singer Pearl Bailey, and she said, people see God every day, they just don't recognize him. And you said, what if every day was a chance to see a new version of God? Because it's about the details. You say, come back, break the trance, pay attention to your breath, your arms, your legs, listen to the sounds, the scrape of a chair, the whir of the copy machine, notice the colors, the royal blue of a coworker's dress. What if what we needed was right in front of us and we just were not recognizing it?
Yes, right. We keep looking in the wrong places because we were taught that it's out there. And of course, that's the whole way the consumer culture keeps going on and on and on, the endless consumption, endless acquisition. We keep storing and storing, for the hunger to come, is what I call it.
And another thing that you mentioned in the book is how often we use fear as a method to try to get the results from ourselves rather than love. And it strikes me in so much of the way that you write that people think that love is something they have to earn, and that when they get there, that's what the there is about, then they're worthy to be kind to themselves, to love themselves. But then again, they never get there because they still didn't do enough. And I think the way you talk about God in this book is not a way we all learned about God or divinity or love, which is love is not earned. If it's earned, it's not love.
Yes,
It's
right.
grace, it's given, it's right there. So, can you talk about that? And you've worked with thousands and thousands and thousands of people and seen them heal. What have you seen in regards to that, learning that love is unconditional?
What I've seen is that it starts with us first. It starts with me. It starts with you. So recently, one of our retreat students was diagnosed with cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And what, and she has kept a running commentary of what it's been like for her. And so, because she's been involved in the retreat, well, exactly what Women, Food, and God is about. It's not just the retreat. It's just, I definitely built the retreats from Women, Food, and God, or maybe vice versa. I can't even remember at this point. Um, but because she's realized, okay, well, I have a diagnosis, and it could be any diagnosis. It could be the stomach flu, for goodness sakes. It could be cancer, a scary thing. And so, what's that about? It's about the thing, which is the diagnosis. And then it's about the stories you tell yourself about the diagnosis. It's about so for her, she went into all of her scary stories. Now, she was lucky because, well, if you can call having a cancer diagnosis lucky, because it turned out that the cancer was contained, that they were able to get it out, that she doesn't need radiation, she doesn't need chemotherapy, but she is nonetheless aware that the voices keep rolling on. What if this comes back? What if my body never feels well again? What if this is genetic and I've passed this on to my son? What if I die earlier than I thought I was going to die? What if they were wrong? What if they didn't really get it all
Oh
out
my
of my
God, it
body?
never ends.
And so the only way to do that is
Ugh.
to realize that your thoughts aren't personal, that you are not thinking your thoughts are thinking you. And your thoughts are based on your conditioning. And your conditioning is based on your environment, how you grew up, what people told you, how they treated you, what you learned was possible, what you learned wasn't possible, all of that. So your thoughts, those automatic thoughts, are based on your conditioning,
Mhm.
not personal. You don't have anything to do with those thoughts. Unfortunately, we take too much responsibility for our thoughts. I shouldn't be thinking this. I can't believe I'm still thinking this. These scary stories are, so most of us spend most of our time remembering the past and anticipating the future. We spend time in not now. So, and we terrify ourselves with images, usually about the future. We weave these stories, but if images from the past were pretty horrible, then we embroider images from the past onto images from the future, and we walk around in a terrified state. And we don't even realize that we are entrancing ourselves with our stories and that none of them are true. Because when this student of mine was entranced and petrified, and we looked at what was she telling herself, and it was all based on the possible future. None of that was going on. She didn't know if any of that was going to go on, had no idea, and yet she was entranced by those visions and therefore missing her life now. So part of it is to understand that there's a situation. Here's what my friend said to me. And then there's the narrative, the story I construct about what my friend said to me. I hate her.
Yeah.
I'm not worth it. I can't believe she said that. I'm a terrible person. I knew this all the time. She's a terrible person. Usually, I heard recently that it these attacks seem to go along gender lines. So, of course, as soon as I say that, that won't actually turn out to be true. But that people who identify as males usually attack others, where people who identify as females seem to attack themselves. I have been working almost exclusively with women for many, many years, so I can't speak for that other side. I can only tell you what I've seen in myself and what I see with the people that I work with.
Yeah. And one thing that I have taken from reading the book that's changed my life and brought me so much more well-being is when I notice that I'm in trance and the thoughts are just going, I will come back to your words and say, what is the feeling I'm just not wanting to feel? And if I just go to the feeling of like, oh, I'm scared. Oh, I'm sad. I'm feeling whatever the feeling is. Where do I feel it in my body? What is it? You talk about in the book how we think that those feelings will annihilate us. That
Yeah.
since we were children, there might be this fear that if I actually felt that feeling of abandonment or sadness or loneliness, it would destroy me completely. So the mind hijacks the situation, which makes things so much worse than feeling the feeling itself, because the feeling, as I learned from you, there couldn't be something more beautiful I needed to learn, which is that the medicine for the pain is feeling the pain.
Mm.
So can you speak to that? How we think that the feelings will actually destroy us. So therefore we go into the mind. We detach from the feeling.
Well, I also think that's based on conditioning. For instance, in my own life, my mother was very unhappy, really depressed, lonely, but also very angry. And so if I felt angry with her, it was just going to end up in a catastrophic situation. So would I have been annihilated? Strong word for that, but it would not have been good. I would have gotten, most likely, because I didn't try it very often, because I learned to push away those feelings, which is what we're talking about now, out of fear of the consequences, which in those years were real. There were real consequences. I couldn't afford to lose my mother's love. I couldn't afford to get hit. I didn't want to get yelled at or shunned or shamed. So I learned to push away the feelings because I believed that if I felt them and expressed them, that would be catastrophic. So we learn those things. Sometimes I'll be watching a television show, and a kid will talk back to their mothers, and I'll think, what? I can't believe that kid is saying those things to their mother. And I can't even imagine a life where that was possible. So I learned, particularly with anger, to push it away. And that's how a lot of women that I work with are with their anger. Just learn to push it away. You'll get in trouble. People don't like you. People don't like angry women. People don't like hostile women. Who do you think you are, little missy? Like that. So that's also with the inner critic in there. We learn to avoid those feelings that have some kind of historical resonance with us.
Yeah. There's something else, and then I want to talk about, because there's just so many cool, beautiful things that you're up to. But another thing that I thought was so powerful that touches on so many things. Let me see if I can find the quote. Where was it? Oh, yeah. Here it is. So you say, being in a relationship with someone and refusing to surrender the love because you don't want to give yourself something you will eventually lose. That's called living in hell. Refusing to love because you want the end game to be different than it is, wanting life to be different from what it is. That's also called leaving without leaving, dying before you die. It's as if there's a part of you that so rails against being shattered by love that you shatter yourself first.
Yes.
I'm going to tell you what I told my audience when I first read that. It's the single best thing I've ever read. That is the single best thing I've ever read. And I've read so many books and spent 3 years in Jerusalem studying mysticism, and I loved all of it, every second of it. That's the single best thing I ever read.
Oh.
First of all, it's gorgeous. Second of all, it's so wise. And third of all, I needed to read that as a child of divorce, as a person who leaves without leaving, who would rather leave before something leaves me.
Yeah.
That really, really resonated. And I find that with our listeners, whether they have divorced parents or not, whether they've lost someone to a disease or not, there is such a fear around having your dreams come true, because everybody has experienced some form of heartbreak. And one great strategy to I don't want to hurt again is I won't reach my arms out for anything anymore, because then I won't have to bear the cost of losing.
Yes.
It takes
Yes.
so much courage to love, to have, to give, to share because of what you just said. So, how do we learn to tolerate that fear and do it anyway?
You know, this is something else I've really been pondering because that's an eternal question in many ways. That is an eternal question, is is the question of uncertainty and the question of and the fact of loss. I remember years ago, one of my first teachers was Stephen Levine, a Buddhist teacher, and he held up a teacup and he said, "It's already broken. This is either going to get lost, stolen, or broken.
Yeah.
That's the way of it." And I'll never forget that. And I didn't want to hear it. I was in my early 20s. And, I probably thought, well, you must not care very much about your teacups, but I really take care of mine. And this teacup is not going to get lost, stolen, or broken. I think that is such a bummer, really, that the teacup gets lost, stolen, or broken. Bummer. But it's also a fact. And I think that once we realize that there is nothing we can do about the fact that we are born into these fragile, fabulous human bodies that, despite what all the biohackers say, and that they can now live to 120, that get old and or frail or eventually die. I just can hardly stand this. I mean, there are some times where I'll watch my husband walk, go to the farmer's market. He'll be in his car and I'll think, oh, I'll try to, like send him blessings and, oh, honey, drive carefully. It's foggy outside, whatever. Come home, come home to me, sweetheart. But I actually know that I am not in control of that. And I hate that. I have to say, if I was in charge, I would not have that be a fact of being alive. I would change the rules. I would absolutely change the rules. Matt and I would die at exactly the same time. One of us would not die before the other one of us. My animals wouldn't die before me. Children would never die before their parents. So I would have different rules here, but I'm not in charge. I find this ever challenging. I do. I find it ever challenging. I can't believe that, I got older. I just can't believe it. On this physical level, it's like, I wasn't planning on this. I didn't choose this. Nobody asked me for my permission here. And yet, oh my God. And so that's how it goes. And so I will. And that statement that you read was about that. So given that, how do we live? How then do we live? Do we then keep ourselves closed and shut down, not taking in what this fragile human life has to give us, stealing it from ourselves again and again because we don't want to lose it. You know, when I met my husband, he had been with a woman, his first wife, who had died. And she had gotten diagnosed with ovarian cancer within the first month that they knew each other. And he was with her, he stayed with her for 5 years until she died. And I remember asking him over and over and over again, don't you, and this is where I was coming from, wouldn't you have rather just cut your losses? I mean, I don't mean to laugh, but I mean, wasn't it worse to go through this whole dying process with her than not to, than just, I mean, you could have stopped seeing her after that first month or a second month when she was diagnosed. And he said, no, it wouldn't. Then I would have lost all those years of loving her and being loved by her. And oh boy, this is something that just hangs in the balance. I wish I had really smart things to say about this, but I don't. One thing I will say is, you know, we lost all of our money in 2008.
I know, I
Every
read
cent.
about that. Ugh.
And one thing I learned about loss
Oh my
then.
God.
So I've had a lot of big lessons about loss, big lessons. I learned that before we lost all of our money, I had been living in a kind of ambient fear about, well, what if this and what if that? And what if we do lose our money? And what will we do with this? And are we this and are we that? And just there was still a fear level about anticipatory loss.
Yep.
And then boom, gone. We had a couple $1,000s left because
It's
we were so dumb about what we did. But that's another story. What I learned
oh my
in that process, and I want to say I would never, ever, ever trade that process
God.
for
Wow.
anything else. I would never go back and not have lost our money. Why? Because I saw what that losing our money allowed me to see what could never be lost.
Mhm.
And what could never be lost was in those days, and I think still is, the ability to see, to breathe, to see what I wasn't seeing. Like when we were talking about walking to the coffee maker and then see what I wasn't seeing because I was so caught up in my mind about, but what if, and do we have enough money? And what if I have to go to Germany and get my blood cleaned? And, you know, like, will I have enough money for that? And these esoteric treatments in case I got sick, did we have enough money for that? And then we had nothing. And I am not kidding you that within a couple of weeks, I was happier than I'd ever been. Why? Because I noticed what I had and not what I might lose sometime. Because for the first time, I started looking at what was
Mm.
here, that my hands, my feet, my eyes, you know, the fact that I was still married, that, you know, that there was a sky, that I had a ceiling over my head. I didn't know how long I was going to have that ceiling over my head, but for now I had sardines, I had chocolate, and I had a roof over my head.
Amazing.
And when most of the time, most people don't let themselves have what they have
Yeah.
because they're afraid of losing it.
Yeah.
So they live in perpetual scarcity and perpetual poverty.
Yes.
So one of the practices that I teach and that I use every day is letting myself have what I already have.
Mm, I love it so much.
Like those flowers behind you
Oh, they're so pretty.
are so gorgeous. your many colored nails,
I know.
your, your, I mean, just, just make me so happy. Just looking at you, I'm just getting happy. Am I letting myself have that? I can feel the joy of that. So, everybody, everybody has so much more than they realize they have, but
Ugh,
they've got to name it and look at it and take it in.
that is one of the most powerful things I've ever heard. Yet again, I've already had them from you, and now there's more. Yeah, my husband, we just finished sitting Shiva for his mom.
Oh,
And his dad passed away in 1987 when he was a little kid, and that was an unexpected loss. And so every day since January 17th of 1987, he's been worrying about his mom's death.
yes, right.
And so in the Shiva process, I thought he was going to collapse into something that was unrecognizable, because I knew how much bandwidth he spent on this anticipatory fear, like you said. And every time when our babies were born, each time, or at our wedding, I saw the way he would almost withhold not celebrating and not feeling joy, because it was so much, so scary, again, so scary. And if you could only see him in this passing, I've never seen him so light. I've never seen him, because this thing he was afraid would happen happened, and he is surviving, and
Yes,
he is okay, and he still has some connection, and figuring out now how the relationship might continue in some way, and
yes,
connecting to her through different moments or through spirit in some way. And that's a beautiful thing he's learning to communicate and connect to. But it's been fascinating to be witness to that, while I have my own ways of doing that. So it's just so beautiful. I was crying as you were speaking, because it is just a friend of mine, her mom died of brain cancer when my friend was 21. And her mom said, as hard as this moment is, since you went to kindergarten, it's been a million tiny goodbyes. Like, even the process of being with you in the living world broke my heart a million times.
right.
And so she said, we're okay, right? And this will change, but it'll be okay. And just the idea of, like, yes, even when you're here, right? There's all those tiny little losses, the teeny
Yes.
tiny ones. And so one of the things I just want to at least touch on it, your more recent book, The Messy Magnificent Life, is so important for my audience, because part of the thing we want to protect, again, ourselves from, we want to protect ourselves from other kinds of loss, like being rejected, like not being perfect. So instead of writing the first manuscript draft, or publishing the first podcast, or making our first cherry pie, we'll just say, forget it, because I can't handle being messy. And Julia Cameron was here and we talked about it. She's actually coming back, I think, tomorrow. We're talking, and she always talks about this, like, every person is creative, but they don't let themselves be messy. And you wrote this whole book on and shining a light on that. And I feel like that's such a huge thing for my audience, the permission slip to live with a little bit of a messiness. Can you just talk about what inspired you to want to share that message, and how we can embrace that?
Well, I don't think that any of us have anything less than messy lives.
Right. That's true.
And because of that, and because, you, you know, one of the things that I love to do is pull the covers down and talk about the things, write about the things that most people are ashamed to talk about, are ashamed to let other people see. When I switched schools when I was in ninth grade, I was the new kid in school, and about with a bunch of people that had been going to school since first grade, and they gave everybody horrible nicknames, and they called me pregnant faced cow. Horrible. I
Really
didn't know,
bad. That's
really,
really bad. Yeah.
really, really bad. But I was so ashamed to let anybody know that. So I carried that around with me, believing it was true. So naming it, saying it, being just as truthful as we can with the truth of ourselves.
Yeah.
And the truth is usually messy. Now, I'll tell you one more story. During the pandemic, at the beginning of the pandemic, one of my really good friends ended our relationship. She'd been a friend for 20 years, ended it, and just didn't tell me why. Just stopped communicating with me.
Oh,
And it was heartbreaking,
yeah.
heartbreaking. I cried and ached. And then, of course, I hated her and blamed her. And I still don't think it was a kind thing to do the way she did it. But what it did was force me to look at, and this goes back to your question about losses and the I don't like to say the upside, but what they open in us is what I would say. Sometimes screechingly open because we don't want them to open it. But I was able to look at the ways that I hadn't been honest with her for a while, that I was uncomfortable with certain things, that I didn't say it, that I had left myself again and again. And it was a chance for me. Look, would I have chosen another way to see that? Probably yes. But to actually acknowledge, wow, this hurt. This was messy. This was painful. I cried a lot. And here's what I see: the unforgettable opening that I had there, just like I did with losing our money.
Mm. And you do talk about the things that most people would be ashamed to talk about. And when you do that, you give other people permission to not feel shame. And your friend Anne Lamott does that. I like her brand new
Right.
book. The very first chapter is about an argument she has with her husband.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to make everyone think that they have the most perfect love life. She
Yeah.
starts the book that way. Oh, he said
Yes.
something, and once I went to go back to San Francisco, and no, let's put it out there. So you do that. I think that people listening might think, but is my story really valuable? Everybody else has already shared a broken story. Is it too much? Should I write this thing? Should I share this thing? It's so humiliating. Like, we judge ourselves, and then the next thing is like, it's not even needed. I'm not needed. The mess is not needed. There's already enough of it. There's enough truth. We compare that constantly to other people, so we don't start.
Comparative judgment is death, hell, horrible. We're all different, all of us. So, yeah. And we're
So,
all messy and we're all magnificent. And that's why I called it This Messy, Magnificent Life, because we're both.
and it's so good. And I want to end by letting people know that you're doing a retreat May 11th through the 16th,
Right.
which is amazing. I highly recommend that everybody buy her books, buy your books, go on this retreat. Is it available now? Can people sign up now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's filling pretty quickly, but people can definitely
Of
sign up now.
course. I
Yes.
can't even believe that you do things like this.
Yes. And it's on Zoom and it's so beautiful. They're my favorite. Besides the Wednesday night meditations that I do, or in addition to those, which are free and anybody can join those, the retreat, which is 6 days, is a deep, immersive, gorgeous experience. So yes, come join us. I'd love to see you all.
Okay, so aside from the fact that we will put all the links in the show notes, tell us where we can find you, where we can find the retreat and everything else.
GeneenRoth.com. The retreat's right there on the homepage, so you can find it right there. It's also under events, and you can look at a little video we did about the retreat, so you can get a taste of it immediately.
Well,
So
I'm
it's
sure it's going to sell out.
GeneenRoth.com. Plus
So
Facebook and Instagram, of course.
amazing. Thank you for everything that you offer. Thank you for being so kind and generous and funny and smart and brilliant. And you gave me back so much of my life. I don't even know what that feels like to hear that, if you could really receive that, because it's really true. I'm so grateful that you went through your process, because it has given me, and the ripple effects of what it's done for me and my kids and my husband and my listeners, it's so with me every second now. And I just can't thank you enough.
Mm.
Thank you so much for being you.
Oh, what makes me happy is that it touched something in you and touched your love,
It
and
did.
you get to share that with your family and your listeners and the ripples of everyone you touch. So that I find that thrilling. Thank you.
It's the best.